Greetings and welcome to this episode of Everyday Enchantment. I have one of my favorite people on the planet here to chat and jam with us today. Her name is Dr. Dee Frayne, and she is all the things. First of all, she's just an ultimate badass on this planet. So that's going to be my first thing. But I'm going to tell you, she's a change maker. She's a strategy leader. She is the coach that you want when you are here making global change on this planet. She wants to blow up all the shit that's not working and help us rehumanize who we are so we can actually do the things that our soul and our heart is calling us to do so this planet winds up a much better place than where we left it. So today we're going to get into a juicy conversation with her, and I cannot wait. Greetings! This is like a regular everyday party that I have on on a normal day, except we're recording.
We're just letting the whole world in on the conversation.
Yes, exactly. They're going to benefit from all the things that we're always jamming about just on a daily basis between us. And Dee, before we kind of jump into wherever we're going to get started today, what else did I miss anything? I know you really do help people embody the change that they feel and they want to be, but if there was anything that I didn't share in the introduction that you want us to know about you before we get started.
No, I mean, shoot, I'm like, I want to get the transcript and use that as my bio. I guess like moving into greater integrity, like walking your talk. There's a lot of people that profess their values, but don't necessarily show up in integrity with their values. And so it's creating, more intentionality and alignment and embodiment of those values.
Yeah.
Which is divesting from a lot of the conditioning and the bullshit that along the way in our human journey.
And I think you and I both have had so much of the messy deconditioning. And I don't know about you, but I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that today, because I think so often people see this like before, right? Okay, this was my life and I wasn't doing what I loved or wanted, or I was exhausted and burnt out. And then, I'm on the other side of something. And here I am in this like magnificent space. And we forget that there's this huge transition in order to be in that integrity, in order to be in a space where we really can show up differently. We've got to go through, we've got to wade through some shit in order for it really for us to actually change and then sustain, I think, whatever those changes are. So if you're willing to, I am.
The messy
middle. Yeah, my messy middles, exactly.
I mean, really, it's like the process of like taking everything out and putting it on the bed and looking at it and deciding if you want to keep it or not. Yeah. To borrow that from Marie Kondo a little bit. But like, it really is, because there's so much stuff that we collect along the way, and it's kind of deciding, that moment of saying, what's mine? Was somebody else's in my life? What was conditioned into me from different places of authority or whatever, culture, society? And if I'm operating in alignment with my highest self, my highest good, with what's in my soul and what I profess I value, what am I keeping and what am I divesting from? What am I deconditioning? Yeah. What am I putting down? And part of that is like creating some permission and safety around that, even because, a lot of these things we've picked, it's like deeply wired into our survival mechanism and our need to be approved and not rejected. And so we take on a lot of this stuff, even though we know it's not quite right. Like, think about like little kids all the time. They're like, that's not fair. They push back because they can see that it's not truth. It's not in alignment with our truth.
Yeah.
But because we have that instinctual need to survive, we're like, and we can't get rejected.
Yeah.
We adopt it as these are the rules for staying alive, really.
Yeah. So I love this. I used to always talk about it like I had like this big bag, right? That was my life. And I just like remember we were a kid, like I could think, I feel like I did this probably. My grandmother probably hated it, but like take your bag and like you're looking for the candy and the lipstick. I don't know what I was looking for, but like emptying your whole life's contents out there. And it like let's talk about what does that actually look like when you're doing it. Like if you were to like Marie Kondo, like, okay, does this bring me joy? Does that bring me joy? Right? Like all these things. It's like, but there's a lot of times in those moments when you do that, when you start to unpack everything and lay it all out, you have no idea, right? Like you're in this place where it's like you can't go back because you've already now just shaken out your life. But at the same time, you're not really clear yet about where it is you're going to land. And so you maybe you're confused or you're feeling overwhelmed or you're just like your whole body is feeling it. And all of a sudden you just can't get out of bed for 3 days.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really interesting. Part of how we are conditioned is not to create change in alignment with our humanity. In fact, like so much of the way that we're taught to change is to reject our humanity, which then makes change really hard because
Mhm.
it's not in alignment with how humans actually operate. Which when we think about like the status quo and power maintaining power, it's really good that they've taught us to dehumanize ourselves,
Yeah.
so the system maintains itself, and also make change harder than it needs to be, because then not only will we not make personal change, then we feel very apathetic. If we can't make change in my own life, how could I change those bigger problems in the world, right? And so
Yeah.
it's really, I think that we focus on the wrong questions, and
Mm.
that's why it becomes hard. We think about like, what am I going to do and how am I going to do that? We,
Yeah.
we, we look to the external first to create the change, when really it needs to be internal. And the right questions to ask is, who am I?
Mm.
Why do I want to change?
Mhm.
Why? Like the who and the why are such a beautiful place to start. And it kind of makes the what and the how first, like not irrelevant, but like once you know the who and the why, then that becomes so clear,
Yeah.
versus when you're starting with who or what and how,
Mhm.
you can get bogged down in like the minutia of the plan, right?
Yeah.
Because you're still trying to create that from the who and the why that society and the world has given to you and programmed into you. So
The
really,
mindset thing to me, like when you start focusing on the like, how's this gonna happen? When's this gonna happen?
Mhm.
It's like you're in the same energy, like to
Mhm.
your point, that we've been in, we've been bathed in, and to create something new from that, it doesn't. It just kind of keeps
It
you
repeats the
focused.
pattern, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And this idea that we can control the external variables somehow and then reverse engineer, and you're saying, "No, actually," what which I
Reverse
totally agree.
engineer the internal stuff.
Yeah, and
Reverse
it's like, "Nope, doesn't
Because
work that way."
everything that we do is to like, honestly, to feel or to avoid feeling a certain way. So if
Absolutely.
you break it down to like, all of the things I do externally are to drive a different internal
Mhm,
experience,
mhm,
then start with that. What's the internal experience that I want to have, and how far away from that is it from my current baseline? I
yeah,
like to start with the question, like with my clients, are what are your top 3 current feelings,
mm,
and what are the top 3 that you would like to feel more often? So
mm,
you can see the drastic difference between where I am and where I want to go.
yeah,
And then that like how you want to feel becomes the North Star. It becomes the guidance, right? The GPS. And it's like, does this next decision I need to make bring me closer or further away from feeling that way?
yeah,
And so then that's why I'm like, the how is irrelevant, right? Because like you could
yeah,
come up with some master strategy, some beautiful plan, but once you get into action and be in the motion of being a human, most of those plans fall apart, right? Because you
yeah,
can't plan for every variable, but you can say, like, notice, does this bring me closer or further away from how I want to feel ahead of time, right? It's like, does taking this job make me feel closer or further away from how do I want to feel?
absolutely.
And then it's a yes or a no. Then it becomes very simple to like take each next step forward.
And I think too, you're right. Like when you start, it's almost like you're trying to figure out what the puzzle's going to look like completed. And then you're like to me, it feels like then you're skipping over the actual experience of being human, right? Which is what we're talking
Mhm.
about, like not bypassing humanity or transcending humanity. Like, if, again, I believe, hey, if we wanted to transcend humanity, go and be in some other planet. But we chose this one, and so being human is part of this whole ride that we're on.
Yeah.
I want to hopefully,
Well, and like we think that there's this false like belief that having the perfect plan means that we won't feel any of the negative hard feelings
yeah,
that are associated with change, that are associated with being a human. And that's
yeah,
just, it's a big huge lie to ourselves that keeps us stuck and not moving, and actually honestly feeling a lot worse, right? Because like when you know that your current state is not how you want to live or operate, and you want change but you're not doing anything towards it, is a really crappy way to exist.
yeah. Well, you can't think. You say this all the time, and I love it. It's like you can't think your way through a feeling that's coming up, right? So
Mhm.
even if your intention, you want to feel more joy in your life or peace or freedom or, choose the thing. Well, if something's coming through, you can't say like anger and grief and some of these things that you and I love to like get around and have some, tussle with. The idea is not to skip to be like, oh, positive vibes only, right? Or whatever all that
Yeah.
bullshit is. But this idea of like joy or peace or freedom, you know what? Sometimes you're going to feel anger. Sometimes you're going to feel sadness. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just means that you are allowing yourself to be on this whole human spectrum of being an emotional being on this planet. Like I said,
Yes.
tell the travel agent you want a different planet if you don't want to be here now. And it reminds me of something also too that you said in an, I think you wrote it in a newsletter a while ago, about sadness, about this realizing like sadness, right? I think you said something like grief, wanting to go somewhere. Like, again, any of us that have gone through any kind of difficult situations in our lives, and we've been in grief and letting go and sadness, and again, instead of pushing it away, is inviting it in to come in to be a guide or a teacher for us as we are getting clear about who we want to be, what matters to me on this planet. Like, it doesn't mean, oh, anything that just feels bad doesn't get addressed, but actually I've seen you do it. You do it with such beauty and grace and compassion for yourself, which is such a model for all of us. It's like, how do you just keep coming back to that and just like, okay, come on in. I'm here. I made you a cup of coffee. I poured you a drink, whatever the case may be. Let's
Yeah.
go.
I think that the big thing is really just changing my thoughts and beliefs about what emotions are, right? Like we're taught to devalue our emotions, that logic and rational thought and analytical thought, all of this is dominant. I think, therefore I am, right? Like that bullshit.
Or more important, maybe even too, like better. I don't know.
Yes, better.
That's a
That
better
like
way to
that you don't
to
wanna
use.
be irrational, right? Like that it's very
Mhm.
coded for like
Mm.
distrusting your emotional, intuitive, physical,
Yeah,
human knowledge, right? Because the emotions come for the body. Emotions are a biochemical response to
yeah.
nervous system stimulus that's happening in your body. So first and foremost, that's like they don't just happen to us. Your senses, your five senses are taking in all the information, and then there's a biochemical response that starts in your brain and floods your body with information.
Mhm.
And so when you think about emotions that way, they are messengers. There are no good or bad,
Yeah.
positive or negative emotions. So that like just putting down that stuff helped me open up and create more space to welcome any feeling, and to, like you said, make it a cup of coffee
Yeah, come on in.
and allow it to be here, right? Because we're not taught how to feel our feelings either. We're
Mhm,
really not. But like the process is to allow, accept them,
mhm.
to feel them, to process them, right? And it's when we resist them, that's when it like it. that's when it feels really gross, actually. Like the biochemical response is very quick. It's like 90 seconds in the body. And if you could just let that wash through you and allow it and welcome it, it's not that bad. What feels really gross is when we really continually try to repress and ignore and deny and like white knuckle that
Mhm.
response. Like I talk about like with my clients about like just putting it all in a satchel, right?
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, I'm not going to feel it. Can't feel it. I don't have time. It's
Moving
icky.
on, got too much to do. Yep.
And you just
Can't
keep
stop
putting
for that.
more and more and more and more shit in that satchel, and you're just dragging it along. And
Yeah.
if you're exhausted all the time when there's not a really good like physical
Mhm.
exertion explanation for why you're exhausted, it's because of all of that unprocessed emotional stuff in your satchel that you're dragging around.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like really making space for it to be there and to, like you said, have a conversation with it. Like, what are you here to teach me? What are you here to tell me about my external environment that's maybe working or not working for me?
Yeah.
And so then it's a clue, right? And like truly embodying that allows you to tap into that wisdom that you have,
Mhm.
and to create that magic, right? It's like,
I agree. And I think also too, because people ask me this all the time. I'm sure they ask you. It's like, what does it mean to allow your feelings? And I forget because now I've been in this practice probably for a good long time at this point. That it's like, yeah, you're right. None of us got taught how to do that. What does that actually mean? And in practical standpoints, I'm curious what you think. But I'm like, okay, I'm angry, or a part of me is angry right now. I am going to be uncensored, right? So I find a place where it feels safe, either with myself or somebody that I care about that I know can hold safe space for me, and allowing whatever it is uncensored, kind of untamed, unsocialized self to be whatever it is. Cry my
mhm,
face off if I feel sad. I mean, I don't know, the day after, 2 days after my mom died, I'm in the Old Navy trying to buy something to wear to her funeral and totally meltdown, completely crying. Everybody is uncomfortable, but I'm like, "Hey, guess what? I'm just really feeling a wave, to your point of that 90-second wave, and I'm just gonna be in it. And you know what? Hey, I'm smack in the middle of Old Navy, but that's just how it's gonna be right now."
isn't like that's like the most normal and most human thing. Like we all,
Right?
right? Like, but we're taught to like, well, I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't do
Yeah,
this in public. I shouldn't, I
yeah,
shouldn't, I shouldn't, I shouldn't,
totally.
right? So that's the opposite of allowing it versus like, wow, I'm feeling something and I can honor this. And like,
Mhm.
maybe instead of doing it in the Old Navy, you walk out to your car.
Sure,
And
absolutely. You don't have to be
so
you
like,
don't have to have it
well,
right, like,
I'm
smack
saying
like
that for
me,
other
but
people, but I know that you and
yeah,
I have a level of comfort being witnessed in our full humanity
absolutely.
in a emotional response. Like
Mhm.
I did realize how weird it was when I was younger that like I was okay with crying around people.
Yeah.
And part much healthier in that now, but like it's okay, right? Like this is totally
Yes,
normal. I'm
yes.
okay. Like it's like there's been so many times I've been in public and I just allow myself to feel whatever it is that I'm feeling, and it's awkward and it's weird, but also it's like I people care. We
Yeah.
forget that people actually care and that like people understand and that
Mhm.
it's okay. And
Yeah,
like it's a really beautiful thing to, be able to hold that space, even for a stranger, of being like, I see
yeah.
you, I'm witnessing you, and you're safe here. Like your feelings are safe here. And so like really like that is what acceptance is in yourself, is like this feeling is safe here. You're
Yeah.
welcome here. That to me is like it's okay. It's okay that I'm feeling, and I don't need to rationalize it. I don't need to criticize it. I don't need to judge it. It is. It will pass through me.
Mhm.
And like in the moment while you are feeling it, you're not processing it, right? Like
Right.
you gotta feel
That's a
it
separate
first.
step. That's a
Right. That is
separate part.
a
Yep.
separate part of your brain,
Yep.
and you don't want to try to do it at the same time, but it's just like, okay, I'm feeling this feeling rise up,
Mhm.
and I'm just gonna allow it to be here, and I'm gonna let it wash through me.
Mhm.
I sometimes explain to my clients of like just seeing it as like a cloud that just like kind of passes through you.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, and that's a great image because the sky is always moving. So that idea of things being in flux and fluid, that's a visual most of us can like understand. I think of like a river or stream too, right? Things are constantly moving through. And the more you allow that, like that's by hey, I'm angry and it's okay to be angry. And because I also think, and tell me what you think about this, but like anger and certain emotions also too in all of our programming, it's like, wait, you're not allowed to be angry. Like that's not okay. In addition to being, being emotional and being irrational, anger, like you're out of control, you're this, you're that, whatever the
Yeah.
case may be. And I don't know, that was probably one of the harder emotions for me to be able to make peace with feeling, acknowledging, making
Yeah.
space for, because
Yeah.
it felt the least safe out of all the things. And I
Totally.
know you're an expert in anger, so
Well, because it does feel so out of control, right? But
mhm,
also, I think there's a lot of damaging conditioning around anger in the spiritual community. Like, there's so many, that talk about anger being the lowest vibrational
mhm,
emotion, which I think is complete bullshit. Like, first of
yes.
all, we have to like delineate anger and like how and why we're feeling it, right? Most of the time, if you are a marginalized human, when
Mhm,
you are feeling anger, it's because you something is happening that is out of alignment with your values. It is a boundary violation. You're feeling either manipulated, gaslighted, taken advantage of, any of those sort of things, like that you are being oppressed,
yeah.
and that is a violation of your humanity. And so that is often why most marginalized humans feel anger.
Yeah. So it almost becomes part of, and tell me where I'm wrong if I'm getting this wrong from your perspective, but becomes part of the change making process,
Yes,
because you have to be able to feel, right? Get into the energy of that to say, hey, a boundary's been crossed. This is not an
yes,
integrity, in order, almost to me, like it feels very fiery, right? Anger. So it
yes.
becomes
Anger
a
is so
change
sacred
agent.
though, because it's telling you that you like almost like you're not safe. This is not working for you.
Yeah.
When we dissociate from our anger and don't allow it, it often comes out as resentment,
Mhm.
frustration, impatience.
Yeah.
Um, when we're not actually sitting with it and allowing it to be there, that's when we get into this like really reactive place where we can be very passive aggressive or like
Yeah.
fly off the handle at people, take it out on the wrong people, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Totally.
that's when we're not honoring it. But it's really actually a beautiful invitation to change. It's telling you that something's not working for you, that you're unsafe, that like your physical, emotional, mental, spiritual boundaries are being violated. And it is we don't want to stay in anger, right?
Right.
The anger is like an invitation to change.
Yeah.
And then you
And I
can
don't think we're gonna stay personally, even joy and happiness and everything, like, nothing is really a final destination, right?
correct.
So it's like, if we just realize we're, like, emotional beings living in, like, clouds are gonna be coming in, like, we're gonna have a blissed out moment, but then we try to hold on to that too, right? So we try
Yeah.
to grasp on, and
Like
rather
attachment
than
to that, right? Where it's like,
yes.
no, it's all transitory. I hate to break it to you. You don't just arrive at happiness, right? It's
But
like,
that's where the magic is. When you're in the space where you're like, life is transitory and I get to be in this, like, flow with it. How do I want to be with that? To me, it's like, then again, then you let go of the control. You're let going of like being led by the mind and like whatever it is that we've all been conditioned to be. And then all of a sudden life starts to expand in ways that it's like all these parts of us that we didn't tap into, that we didn't use, that we didn't, we had access to, but we didn't nurture at any point. Now all of a sudden it's like, ooh, it's like walking in from like, Wizard of Oz or whatever, like the black and white movie screen to the Technicolor. Like you're like, whoa. At least
yeah.
that's how it experienced.
No, I think that's such a perfect like metaphor, right? Because I'm sitting here thinking that like the more that you are willing to feel any emotion, the more that you're willing to sit with yourself and your humanity and
Mhm.
allow yourself to feel whatever it is that comes up,
Yeah.
you will move toward a new baseline.
Ooh,
Right? Like when you're unwilling to feel, your baseline is usually resentment or not resentment, resistance and avoidance and numbing. So you're not really feeling anything, or if you are feeling, it's very uncomfortable,
yeah.
right? But the more that you are willing to be with yourself and your full humanity,
Mhm.
to honor your true emotional experience, your baseline shifts into technicolor. And that technicolor is not like constant joy, constant happiness. That technicolor, that baseline is actually more like contentment, satisfaction, and ease, which is like so grounded, right? Like it feels like that technicolor baseline is like a grounded, it's better than neutral, right? It's so fulfilling.
You're
But
right.
it's not
You're spot
necessarily,
on.
but it's not that high, right? It's not the
Yes.
like the icky low of avoidance and
Yeah.
numbing and resistance. It's you come up to
Yeah.
ease and contentment and satisfaction and fulfillment
Yeah.
because you know that like I can handle any emotion that comes up. It's a
And that's
totally
it. That's the
normal
difference.
human
I can handle
experience.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
If I were listening, I'm just thinking if somebody's listening to this and it's like, how does somebody know? Because when you're in resistance, sometimes everybody else sees it, but you, but
Right.
you. How do you help yourself? Like if you're like, oh, Dee, like how would I know if I'm in resistance? Like what do you see with clients? What do you see out in the world when you're working with all these change makers? What does it usually look like when
It's a
people are shutting down
whole
like
mess of self-critical
that?
BS, right? Like
Mhm.
judgment, criticism, being mean to yourself, being a jerk to yourself, right? I shouldn't
Yeah.
feel this way. I should be doing something different. Should,
Mhm.
shouldn't, shouldn't.
Yep.
It feels really awful. But it really, I think that's that internal manifestation of just being a complete asshole to yourself is usually like symptoms of resistance.
Oh, I love that. And I think too, like for me, what I find is like you're not usually sleeping well. If you're not
Yeah.
digesting your emotions, like for me, again, I always
Mhm.
have some kind of like digestive. I'm not
Yeah, no,
diagnosing anybody here, but like just
absolutely,
in
but
my
like a
own
lot of
experience.
physical ailments, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's such a huge rise in like chronic illness
Yes.
and
Yep.
especially in women. And it's no surprise because women are conditioned to not trust their
Yep.
emotions, to
Yes.
not honor their humanity, to swallow our anger,
Yeah.
right? And that comes out in the physical form. Again, like those many of those chronic physical ailments that medicine can't touch
Hmm.
are unprocessed emotions.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's the only thing, and I'm not trying to negate like
No, of
physical
course not.
pain,
Of
right? But
course
like
not.
I
But
feel
there's
like
a component of
physical
that.
pain
There's
is
always a component for me every time something.
I feel like when your body keeps trying to give you more and more and more and more emotional cues
Yeah.
and you ignore them and repress them over time, it's going to get louder and it's going to do it in a different way. It's going
Yeah.
to send it through a physical channel because maybe at least you'll pay attention to that pain.
Absolutely. When I was like in my late 20s, I got a cold, turned into bronchitis, turned into the flu, turned into pneumonia in like 3 days or 4 days or something. And I was out obviously on sick leave for like 2 months. I was like 20 something. People are like, how do you have pneumonia? And it's that debilitating. My body was like, we are shutting the show down right now because again, I had been working 3 jobs, getting my master's degree, like all the
Yeah,
things.
too much.
Again, numbing, resisting, you name
Yeah,
it, in a marriage that was abusive. I could name all the things now that I just kept saying. I can remember like my resistance model was keep
yeah.
going,
Well, because
keep
we're
going.
taught that all of those external things, like when I get the better job, when I get the
Yep.
degree, when I finally arrive at success, then I will feel good.
Yep. It's a
That
lie.
and that's that dehumanizing change model, right? Like
Yeah.
really that's like be a great capitalist
Yeah.
and then you'll feel good, which is such a
Yeah.
lie,
Oh. So if
right?
somebody wants to like start, like let's say they're like, I think I'm kind of practicing, being with my humanity. What are like your best favorite things that
Mm.
people can do that nurture this kind of mindset, that nurture this space of like again, stopping, processing, being this kind of whole human, whole WHOLE, whole human on this planet, and then that again that almost inevitably leads to shifting then the external things as well too. But where do people start, or what do they do? Where
I
where
mean,
do
I
you
think
go with
that
them?
like if you want to do this on your own,
Mhm.
I would start with like noticing how you are in relationship with yourself,
Mm.
right? And like all the ways that you're being an asshole,
Mhm.
and soften into that. Put down the shoulds, the judgments, the criticisms, especially those around your emotions. So like I said earlier, I changed the story I had about my emotions, the relationship, and just allowed them to be there, which
Mhm.
it's very uncomfortable and you're not going to like it at first. And most of my clients hate me when I say, no, you actually just need to go sit and cry.
Mhm.
And you're going to think that it's, if you let that satchel get really full, it's going to take hours and hours and weeks and so much time to heal. And most of my clients go and cry for like 5 minutes and then they come back. They're like, I can't believe how much better I feel.
Mhm.
So, just know that it's transitory. You're not going to get stuck in it. If you've got a big, heavy satchel, like it'll come and go and you'll, release some of that. But, just there are no negative or positive emotions. There are just emotions and they're allowed to be here. They're allowed to be here. And we don't need to attach any sort of logical, rational story to it. Changing the
That's
story.
a really good point. Can you separate, and I don't mean you, but can all
Yeah.
of us just practice separating the feeling of the emotion, where it's showing up in our body, whatever that is, with the analytic, like I always say, like that will come later if I want to do any analyzing,
Yeah.
but not trying to mush it all together. And I think that's an important
Because our
piece.
brain isn't like our body is also like when we haven't done this,
Hmm.
um, it's not happening in a linear fashion,
Right.
right? Like as I started to like do this work, I and just say like anything's welcome here, and I'm going to honor it. Like one day, I remember this one day I woke up and I was sad,
Hmm.
and I was just like, I'm sad, and that's okay. I am having an experience of sadness. Oh, that's the other thing too. Is like,
That's a good one.
just changing the language that you're using to describe it as it's an experience of rather than I am sad, which makes it like more of a permanent state identifying with the emotion. I'm experiencing sadness. So
Hmm.
that like even that shift right there allows it to be something that moves, right?
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
transitory. And
Yeah.
so, I woke up and I realized I'm like, oh, I'm feeling sad. Sad
Hmm.
is welcome here. I'm having an experience of sadness and I don't have to know why it's here. Cause I was like, I woke up and I'm like, why am I sad? Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this was like shortly after my grandma died. Like it was like a month or two after, which, knocked me on my feet with grief, but it didn't feel like that kind of grief.
Mhm.
And I could see my brain like in while I was experiencing sadness, trying to be like, like figure out like why there was sad. And I just was like, it's okay, brain. We don't have to know. We don't have to know.
Yeah.
It,
I
it
think
could
that's
be like
huge,
it could be
the
like bugs in
taking
the
the
playground.
why out of it, because I think that
Very
that's
sad
a
here and it's
distraction.
welcome.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it can stay here as long as it needs.
Mhm.
And, within a couple hours, I was like, okay, sad is gone.
Yeah.
And like, I still don't like a couple years later, I can remember that day. I'm like, so much freedom and like not having to know why I was sad and not having to come up with some story or explanation other than like currently my brain and body is processing some
Mhm.
stimuli that may have happened while I was dreaming, may have
Mhm.
happened in the last couple weeks, may have happened in my entire lifetime. I don't know. But
Yeah.
my body is like processing it, metabolizing it, moving it through, and it's fine because it's a normal part of being human. Sometimes I am sad and I don't have to know why.
I love that, and that's such a freeing thing, the letting go of the knowing why, because there's like, that's immediately, because then we're trying to go into fix it mode usually,
Yeah.
which is if I know why, then I can fix
Like you
it or
said
I
it,
can
like
address
that your
it.
favorite quote is like you can't outthink a
Yeah.
feeling. Like the only way
One
to
of my favorite things.
you've got to feel the feeling. That's the only way to solve a feeling problem is to feel
And
it.
yeah, and any like, once you get to a place where I think as you practice this, any feeling is welcome. There's no feeling
Yeah.
I'm not willing to feel, right? Like that's what we're saying. And you get to that place where again, maybe you just do it for a few minutes, you
Yeah.
check in with your emotional body and your, what's going on. Don't have to sit there and wallow for 10 hours. Sometimes, hey, I've had a nice good wallow for a day or two, but it doesn't always work that way. And I think that's part of the storytelling. It's like, oh, this is going to take a long time.
Yeah.
This is going to break me. This is going to whatever. When you can detach yourself from whatever, you can observe the mind, like you said, but not just letting the mind kind of be the leader through whatever this is.
Yes. Yeah. Because those are all the rules that we have learned
It's true.
to follow this. We're not allowed to feel.
Yep. No feeling. No
Yeah.
feeling.
Which is not the truth, right? Like when you're like, oh wait, it's probably not going to take a long time. It's
Yeah.
transitory. The biochemical response is like 90 seconds.
Yeah.
And
I know.
it's going to take as
Thank
long
you,
as it
Jill
needs.
Bolt, for that.
That.
I said thank you, Jill Bolt, for that stroke of
Yeah.
genius and her research on the
Yeah.
90-second thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're right. You're so right.
I
So
mean, like you've seen me, like I've had moments where like I'm stuck in it. And like I think that's important too, is that like I'm not perfect at this. I'm still a normal human. And sometimes I have resistance and sometimes I avoid it. And sometimes I don't want to feel it. And I come to you like all like me. And when you're like, yo, you just need to feel your feelings. And then I snot bubble cry and you hold space for me. And I'm like, oh yeah, I was trying to resist being a human. I was trying to be a robot. I was trying not to feel. And it's
yeah,
okay. I don't have to be perfect at it, but it's like, I just noticed, oops, I click back into trying to be a robot that doesn't have feelings. Whoops, I am not honoring my humanity. Whoops,
yeah.
I fell back into the dominant programming of our society that tells us that we shouldn't feel. Whoops. Okay.
And
I
I
didn't
love
want to
that
do this.
because
I
it
know
has
how
so
to
much
erase this.
compassion and grace to it. It's not like, oh, I'm bad because I did this,
Yeah.
or I can't get it right, or whatever the case may
Yeah.
be. It's
It's a
just like
practice. It's like, I'm going to
pivot
keep
back.
practicing being a human for the rest of my life.
Hey, the travel agent said, see, I gave you what you all wanted. You just didn't realize. Anyway, who knows if that is the case? We'll find out maybe one day. Maybe we'll never find out. But I love to think about like, oh, all the planets. Which one are we picking? Oh, I want the one where it's the messy human experience and the soul's along, and we're all trying to figure it all out, like the entire lifetime. And again, practice, compassion, all these things, just coming back to it, even if again, being in resistance is part of being human. So that's the
Mhm.
humanity part too. We're not saying, hey, try to get rid
Yeah.
of that. It's just
No, because there's a
noticing it,
protective
being
element to
aware.
that, right? That resistance can be protective.
Yeah.
Um,
And sometimes it's not safe. To your point, sometimes it doesn't feel safe. And so, nurturing when we feel safe to be able to do those things.
mhm.
Usually my body is my guide for me on those kinds of things. But sometimes,
Yeah.
we get our wires crossed on
Yeah,
that.
like you and I think, we were talking about crying in Old Navy. Like
Yeah.
we have created that safety for ourselves, and that deep trust in our ability to feel. But
Yeah.
like I don't feel safe to feel my feelings in every environment. And so like, sometimes you gotta wait. You gotta wait
Yep.
and be in a physical environment or in whatever type of environment where it is safe to process, to safe to
Absolutely.
feel, safe to feel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My friend, I could talk to you for hours on end, as you know, and this is a juicy conversation that I
Yeah.
know so many people are going to enjoy. Okay, so I love to pull like a thread out of where we've
Mm.
meandered. What would you want people to kind of leave with if they only carried one thing beyond what they've listened to? What would you say to like continue to kind of chew on as they leave?
All feelings are welcome, all feelings are valid. And the
Ooh,
most
love it.
human honoring thing that you can do is to feel your feelings.
Yep. Even if you don't even know what it is, sometimes, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I don't even know what this thing is. I'm just gonna let it I'm a
I'm feeling a
feel
thing
it.
in my body. That's right. Yeah.
Go back to physical sensations if you get lost, because the brain wants to label everything too. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's way better than telling the story, being like, "Wow, I'm feeling my cheeks get hot. I'm feeling my
Yes.
stomach clench." That's a way better use of your brain in an
Yeah.
emotional experience than to be like, "Oh, well, maybe it's because my boyfriend did this and my sister did that," and right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
no, just come back to
Underneath that program to me is there's like I'm looking for the place where somehow I'm wrong and somehow I did something wrong versus
Mm.
just the neutrality of
Well, we're
letting
taught
myself
that
have the
people
experience.
cause our emotions,
Yes.
right? So it's like, who do I need to blame for making me feel this?
Yes. Oh my gosh. You're reminding me of I did some volunteer work in a local detention center. And I remember working with a group of men one time. We were talking about feelings, which was a very kind of vulnerable conversation we were having. And I said, you know, this idea that people made, this person made me angry, and that I was like, nobody has that power over us, without our consent, without our permission. So
Mhm.
it's like, can you say that again? He goes, I think you just changed my whole worldview. And I was like,
Oh,
You know what? When you start to feel like, again, and this is where we take our power back too and change the
mhm.
world. I have ultimate the power to be able to be who I am, feel what I'm feeling, acknowledge that, hold safe space for myself. It's not linked to
Mhm.
anything outside of myself. All of a sudden, again, that technical color world just expands and starts sparkling
Right.
all over the place.
Oh, yeah, you take that emotional authority back rather than, like, giving all of your power away to everyone else. Because the
Exactly.
truth is that isn't that the line from, Wizard of Oz anyway? You had
Is
it all
it? Oh, yeah, you
along?
had the power all along. Yes, one of my favorite lines
I
on the
love
planet.
that, like, that movie, like,
The Wizard of Oz and me, like, there's so many beautiful
Yeah,
metaphors and
but
lines
you've
from
had the
books.
power all along, like,
Yeah,
and you take that power back by being
yeah,
willing to sit with yourself and your emotions.
absolutely. Absolutely. So, Dr. D, I have a feeling that people are going to want to get into your world if
Mm.
they aren't already in and don't know you that well. Where can they find you and get connected?
Yeah, so my website is fedupfiredup.com, and you can find me on, Instagram, it's just my name, Dee Frayne, or if you want LinkedIn, I don't spend a lot of time in there, but if you wanna, like, play in a professional space, I'm on there too, it's Dee Frayne.
Well, we will put all of your the official links in the show notes so people can find you. But come get fired up, become that change maker. Again, practice all of this stuff with us because this is the way that we change the world order here. And I'm in for it. I know you're in for it. And however we can be in service, it's such a pleasure. And it's such a pleasure to have you on Everyday
Likewise,
Enchantment. So
thanks so
thank
much, I love
you.
chatting with you.
Likewise, my beautiful friend. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in. Get all the delicious details and links we've mentioned in this episode in the show notes below. If you'd like to chat about this episode or learn more about how to work with me, come visit me in my private Facebook group, Everyday Enchantment, or check out my website, staceyandon.com, where you can find out more about my Leap of Faith coaching, my Map Makers group program, and the School of Intuitive Magic. Plus, a special shout out for all the production and editing of this show by Richard Wilmore. That's it for now, love. Here's to living a life enchanted. See you soon.